Good morning. I'm Dr. Steve Stites, Chief Medical Officer here at the University of Kansas Health System and Executive Vice Chancellor of the University of Kansas Medical Center. Welcome back to Open Mics with Dr. Stites and our monthly edition of Show Me the Science. This is my favorite show. But before we talk about the important stuff, I got some other important stuff to talk about. How about those Royals? And yes, I came dressed for success today. I will take it off, so I take it up. I do have a little bit of hair left. Watching the Royals has been a little stressful this year. I want to point out something. We all have our good luck charms. This pen, wrong side, this pen right here, 2015, baby. That's my 2015 pen that got us to the World Series. It's not Bobby Witt and Salvi Perez. It's that pen. All right, we have seen incredible progress in breast cancer awareness, screening, and treatments over the past few decades. Overall, breast cancer is more survivable than ever, and that deserves to be celebrated. But a gap remains between black and white women, and today we're exploring what could be done, what should be done, and what is being done to help close that gap. Take a look at this graph. Part of an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It shows deaths from breast cancer over time, where the blue line is white women and the red line is black women. You may be surprised to see that back in the 70s, the lines were very close. Mortality in black women was actually lower than white women, but since the mid-80s, the lines have diverged. Overall, deaths are dropping, but there is a gap. Black women still have a 40% higher death rate compared to white women. And as I noted, that's not where it started. So today, we'll learn why the disparity is due in part to the kinds of breast cancer that are more common among black women, but a huge part of that disparity is due to the social determinants of health, something we're going to discuss more in just a few moments. But first, let's do some morning rounds. It's not often we talk with a cellist on this program, but I'm speaking with cellist and composer Joshua Roman, who has turned his experience with long COVID into music. And now he's bringing that music to some of our patients and staff. He is performing tomorrow night at the University of Kansas Cancer Center in Olathe, thanks to our partners at Turner Point for bringing Joshua to the Metro. Joshua, good morning. You've been living with long COVID. Hey, you've been living with long COVID since 2021. Talk to us about how that's impacted your life.
Well, I was a very fit, active person before. I'm a cellist, so my career involves a lot of traveling, and I would often run 6 miles in the morning, meditate, go to a rehearsal, do a bunch of other things, and in the evening play a full concert. That was a regular day for me, very much type A. And then long COVID changed. I'm not going to say all of that because I'm still type A. But with long COVID came dysautonomia, processing difficulties, so cognitive issues that stopped me from going to grocery stores, driving, even reading sometimes. And now, instead of running the mile in under 6 minutes, I have trouble walking up the stairs in the subway in New York City and often have to pause. So it has dramatically changed my ability to consider myself an independent person. And ultimately, I think there's a good lesson in there, which is we all need help, and embracing our vulnerability is important as human beings, helps us connect. But it has stopped me from doing a lot of the things that I used to consider very much a part of my identity.
That's a lot of loss. Let's just be honest. That's a lot of loss, and I think a lot of us would struggle to even be on this program and talk about it. So thank you for doing that. Your new album is called Immunity. I think I understand that, but you tell us about why that title was chosen.
Well, I would be curious to hear what you have to say, because immunity to me is a question. I think there may be a specific medical definition, but in this case, the idea of immunity as a concept, that we could be immune to something as an individual. Well, if it affects somebody else, but not me, it actually is going to come around and affect me as well, is one of the many things that's interesting to me about the concept of immunity. But it's more of a question and an idea than so much a solid statement.
You know, I have a little autoimmune disease sometimes myself, not sometimes, I do a little bit of myself, and there is this oddity about saying, why is my immune system tuned this way and somebody else's is tuned a different way, and why did COVID barely affect somebody and why do I have long COVID? I mean, that's a hard thing, and for you to be so active and have that restricted, has that changed? Has it gotten better, worse over time?
You know, something about my body and my immune system seems to love COVID. I've had it 4 times, even though I take precautions. I'm still one of the few wearing masks in public. And I don't know why that is, but what I can tell you is that every time I have COVID, it changes something about my long COVID. There was a whole year when I couldn't read almost at all. I didn't finish a single book. I was trying to read 1 book for a year. And then magically, after catching COVID again, 2 things happened. 1, I could read, kind of. And 2, my heart rate dropped back from the high 90s as a resting heart rate where it had been since I got COVID the first time. Crazy, even on beta blockers. Dropped back to 63, which is closer to where it was. I had more difficulty with physical exertion after that, but it was nice to be able to read again. Things have changed once yet again since the last COVID. It's constantly evolving and I'm constantly adjusting. But again, I would say I'm learning life lessons the hard way. We're never fully in control. We never know what's going to happen next. And accepting that and doing our best is really all we can do.
And I think you've got a great attitude, and this is a great story about how COVID remains so much of a mystery. Hawkeye and I used to always say, we're building the airplane while we fly it. Well, I'd like to tell you that airplane has all the right parts. That would not be true. We don't know all the answers at all. So why is it important for you now on a personal level to perform for others who are also living with a chronic disease, long COVID or otherwise?
Well, that's a great question. I considered not playing the cello at all anymore because it's so difficult now to understand my limits. And I think I've gotten a very good grasp on that. I can still do most of the performances that I want to do. And I've only let go of a few things. I just am much more strategic about how I use my energy, how I pace up to a performance. And that's great. But it's something that I think a lot of people are going through without feeling connected to others and without realizing that they're not alone. Not only because of a lack of connection to other patients, but because a lot of people don't even know long COVID is a thing. And those who do don't understand what it is. Even the top researchers still have a lot to learn about how it works. So making that first connection with other patients, just gathering in the room before I even play a note, already feels so powerful because for many, it's the first time they feel seen, and I can relate. And that, to me, is worth it. And then once I start sharing and playing music and bringing people into a cathartic space, I'm exemplifying opening up and then giving them a chance to do so as well at the end. And then that's when the magic happens, when I get to see patients connecting with each other, with the healthcare system, many coming back into care for the first time in months or years or even ever. And to me, that's what it's all about, is creating those connections, giving people a sense of hope that's grounded in reality, not just a fantasy.
You know, Joshua, you said that great. And just to say out loud, we see you and we appreciate you for being on this program. So thank you for being here. And hope is one of the most powerful things we offer in medicine. Good luck tomorrow night, Joshua. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stites. Thank you.
All right, joining us today on our discussion about disparities in breast cancer is Dr. Sandra Stites. Now, I might be related to her. She's my wife, and she's also the Chief Medical Officer at Vibrant Health. We've been married for about 37 years and getting close to 38. Now, Vibrant Health is a group dedicated to providing access to health care regardless of social economic obstacles. Vibrant is a federally qualified health center. We'll probably talk a little bit more about what that means in just a moment. And Dr. Stites is an OBGYN who has dealt with many breast cancer patients over many years. Also, Lisa Weatherspoon. Lisa is a triple-negative breast cancer survivor and clinical trial participant. It is so great to have you both here. Thank you for being here. Joining us via webcam is Dr. Priyanka Sharma, a breast medical oncologist and an expert in breast cancer research with a special focus on triple-negative breast cancer. Dr. Sharma is the co-leader for drug discovery, delivery, and experimental therapeutics at the University of Kansas Cancer Center, not to mention her role in various national groups like the National Cancer Institute and the Southwest Oncology Group. Dr. Sharma, welcome back to our program. I've known Priyanka since she was really little young. She was back when she was a resident and chief resident in the training program here at KU. Let's start by hearing a little bit of Lisa's path from diagnosis to no evidence of disease. Here's Jessica Lovell.
I found a lump under my left arm, and initially I thought it was a swollen lymph node, but it continued to swell and stop and swell and stop, and then it just stopped going down, and I knew it was cancer.
Lisa Weatherspoon was right. Stage 3 triple-negative breast cancer.
Yeah, I drew the short straw, right? You know, you got to start dealing with the possibility of your own mortality.
As a Black woman, her chances of dying from breast cancer were 40% higher than that of a white woman. But with family to live for, Lisa wasn't about to go down without a fight, even with the short straw and odds against her.
So that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when another young woman gets that same diagnosis, the statistics that she reads are better and brighter.
Lisa immediately entered into a clinical trial, something her breast oncologist at the University of Kansas Cancer Center, Dr. Lauren Nye, encouraged her to do.
Faith and science are not on opposite sides of the table, right? They are not, they can really coexist peacefully. I have a science background, and I am a deeply spiritual person.
This woman of faith found a way to incorporate the religious ideals of her Seventh-day Adventist upbringing.
I wanted to make good choices in terms of what I was putting in my body.
With the power of research and science.
They can really coexist peacefully. Being that this is a disease process that affects young African and Latina women, honestly, I thought somebody has to do the work, right?
She entered and completed the clinical trial, and this past year underwent a lumpectomy and chemotherapy, and under the care of radiation oncologist Dr. Carolyn Savio, recently finished her last round of radiation therapy. And with the sound of that bell signaling the end of treatment, Lisa is all about getting back to what she loves most, her girls.
My oldest wrote an English paper about the experience and her fear of losing her mom, and it was so difficult. I don't think they were able to imagine what life would be like. I mean, we're best friends. All three of us.
And in a full circle moment, we met her here at the place where she first came to get grounded and grasp her new diagnosis, only this time with a new view.
The only thing we know is that we're going to die. How do you make the most of what you have right now? How do you grow where you're standing? How do you find beauty in today, in this moment? That's your task.
Okay, so I'm a little choked up, but Lisa, how are you doing today? And thank you for being on our program.
First, I want to thank you, and you, Dr. Sharma. It means a lot to me to be here today, and I'll answer the question. I am fantastic. I am fantastic.
Well, that's awesome, right there. Okay. Now, you participated in this clinical trial. We heard you say in this story, somebody has to do the work. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to do that work, and why did you agree to be part of that?
There's a lot of reasons. For selfish reasons, it offered me an opportunity to undergo less chemotherapy. And in that case, I didn't want one drop more than I needed, and I certainly didn't want one drop less. So given that opportunity, which I wouldn't have had without the study, I wanted to take advantage of it. But more importantly, right, because life is so much more than you. There are brown and Latina girls all over the world. Here's another thing. There are beautiful blue-eyed blondes who are suffering with triple-negative breast cancer. It's one of the least researched breast cancers, and it has one of the highest mortality rates. And when I recognized that my cancer was triple negative, and I also realized that the population most adversely affected were Black and Latina women, I'll be honest, my very first thought was, I'm screwed. Because who cares about them? And then I decided that I have training, I have resources, I have opportunities, and so I felt that it was incumbent on me to do the work. And that meant at first being part of a study, second, using the resources that I had to encourage others, and now to be a voice to shine light on this and to offer whatever opportunities that I have.
Yeah, I think in the midst of having to deal with this difficult diagnosis, to also think that way is, man, that's a beautiful thought. And wish we even had more folks that would think about like that. So we have a slide. This is a study published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, tried to break down the factors contributing to the disparity of deaths. Lack of insurance, 37%, tumor characteristics, 23%, comorbidities, 11%, differences in treatments, 4.8%. Let's just say it out loud. These curves looked really similar on that New England Journal of Medicine article that we first started back in the 70s and 80s, when there wasn't as much therapy for breast cancer, right? It was radiation and maybe some terrible chemo. And now that we have more advanced therapies, suddenly there's a disparity. Dr. Sandra Stites, talk to us about, is the biggest factor a lack of health insurance? What is this?
The biggest factor is a lack of access, and that the majority of the time that comes down to the fact that if you are uninsured, if you are underinsured, you do not have access to these more advanced therapies.
And you know, that's a problem here in the United States. And we'd also like to point out that Medicaid expansion would help with some of this. So I'd like to highlight a couple of studies seen on this graphic about the link to Medicaid expansion. Now I'm just going to pause here for a moment before I hit the study. So in Kansas, to get Medicaid, you have to have an income of less than, basically as a single person as an example, less than $5,000 a year. And be disabled in many cases, because that's the only way you can make that little of an income. In places where you have Medicaid expansion, it's not rosy, but it's up to $20,000 a year, and you can still get Medicaid, which allows you to have access to therapy. We'll turn to anybody here at KU that's got Kansas Medicaid. So that's a really important point. And talk to us a little bit, because Vibrant treats a lot of Medicaid and a lot of uninsured patients.
Absolutely. The majority of our patients actually have no insurance and are uninsurable oftentimes as well. And the difficulty arises because we, as a federally qualified health center, what we do is preventative care and primary care. And so we are often in the position in which we identify that there is a problem because of the screening that we're able to do. But beyond that becomes the difficult point. We can identify a problem from the screening. The next step for diagnosis, some programs will allow us to do diagnosing, but the treatment arm is what is missing, which is very underrepresented for our patients.
In fact, there was one study that we have that demonstrates that in places where there's been Medicaid expansion in the states that have, there's no difference in there's no disparity in outcomes anymore with breast cancer therapy for Black or white women. That's a remarkable statement. But Kansas is one of 10 states that doesn't have that yet, Medicaid expansion. So access to health care we've talked about being a social determinant of health. Others include housing, transportation, finances, education, food access. So from your standpoint, Dr. Stites, man, that sounds so odd to say. Hey, Sam, are social determinants of health more important than the clinical care itself?
Doctor?
Yes. When I get that at home, it's not good, guys. I just get to hear right now. But, doctor, it's like, oh, this is trouble. I've done something bad.
When we take care of the whole person, only 20% of that care is medical care. 80%, in order to take care of the patient, has to do with the social determinants of health. It has to do with access. It has to do with transportation, their ability to get to the appointments. It has to do with food access. If you're worried about whether you can feed your children, you will always place yourself behind that. Education, it most definitely impacts the medical care.
Yeah. Dr. Sharma, social determinants of health are so important. Would you like to see oncologists focus more on the person who has the cancer and less on the biomarkers or stage of the cancer itself? How do we balance that in your clinic?
I think the two are equally important, just like Dr. Sandra Stites mentioned. We need the staging and the biomarkers to determine what the appropriate treatment for the individual should be, but we need to have a good understanding of the individual's circumstances, social determinants of health, their wishes, their comorbidities, to ensure that that appropriate treatment for that individual actually gets delivered. The treatment can do no good if we can't deliver it to an individual. So they definitely do go hand in hand. The certain things that we can control or influence in clinic, we help manage, like the comorbidities, at least in the cancer center, getting help for patients for transportation to arrive to their appointments. But there are many things that unfortunately continue to stay out of our hands or control, like medical insurance and many other things. And as oncologists, those are probably a lot more frustrating for us as a discipline than many other challenges and issues that we have to face in terms of procuring drugs, getting insurance approvals, pre-auths, and all of those other types of things.
So the second biggest driver of disparity mentioned in that study was tumor characteristics. Dr. Sharma, talk to us about what tumor characteristics, what does that mean? How do they help drive disparity? Is this only about hormone receptors? What are we talking about here?
So relative to white women, triple-negative breast cancer is more common in Black women. About 20% of all triple-negative breast cancers in the United States impact Black women. And overall, as it was mentioned, triple-negative breast cancer has lower survival compared to other breast cancer subtypes. It's still north of 80%, so we're still curing a lot more than what we're not curing, but that is one of the factors. The other factor is access to health care and preventative services lead to later stage of diagnosis for certain racial and ethnic groups, and that'll drive the differences in outcomes. There's a lot of progress being made in developing new treatments for all breast cancer subtypes, including triple-negative breast cancer. The next challenge is going to be able to deliver those newer treatments that are impacting survival to all individuals impacted by those cancers equitably, and that will require efforts from multifacited key stakeholders.
Yeah, and a lot of things we're going to have to do legislatively to make sure we get people access to care, because if you don't have access, you don't ever know if you have triple-negative breast cancer. So.
Right.
Do you think if we can improve the treatments for hormone-negative breast cancer, can we improve the racial disparity in mortality with that alone?
That would be one part of the improvement, but I think the more important aspect would be able to deliver those newer treatments to everybody. There was a recent study that I just read that showed that in breast cancer, immunotherapy is one of the newer agents that we've been using for the last 3 years, that Black women are receiving it less than white women. Again, it'll go down to lack of insurance. Some of it goes down to other medical problems. Certain drugs can't safely be given to patients that have uncontrolled hypertension or diabetes or heart disease, and certain racial ethnic groups are more prone to having those comorbidities, so that impacts their ability to deliver those agents. But majority of this is access. Access because of lack of insurance, and access because of where the patients are seeking care. Not every place that provides cancer care has all the resources to help patients have access to not only newer treatments, but also trials. Not all places that provide cancer care have trials open or invest resources and infrastructure in having clinical trials open.
It's both stunning and sad to me when you look at that graph and you see the divergence from the 70s and 80s, and you think, okay, so things have gotten worse as care has gotten better because people aren't having access to care. That is heartbreaking because it means there are people who are dying who should not die. And Dr. Stites, that's got to be hard for you when you see this at Vibrant, when people come in and you're like, I can't do that. I have no choices here.
We describe it as moral distress. We know that it is available, that these newer studies are available, and they are completely outside of our reach. Even from the point of diagnosis, again, that we can get to the point where the screening is done. When it's time for treatment, there are programs available. We in particular work with YJO Care, which is run by, it's a community partnership with Wyandotte County and Johnson County Medical Societies. And it's a referral system that allows many of the hospitals in the city and the physicians in the city to contribute their care. However, the wait list, the wait time is 6 to 18 months.
That's a little long for cancer, I'm just saying. That's not a good answer.
The delay of care, delay of diagnosis, and just the distress of the patient recognizing that there is something wrong, but I can't find out the details for 6 months or 12 months.
And
That is moral distress.
It is what's, yeah. It's definitely moral distress. I might have a stronger term for it, but
yes.
I won't say it in the air. So, Dr. Sharma, I know we need more representation in medical research. Why has it been difficult to include women of color in research?
So I think it's also just like mortality differences. It's also multifaceted. One of the primary reasons is where patients seek care. So if you're seeking care at a place that does not support clinical trials, does not have the infrastructure to have the trials, then there's no participation. The other factor is comorbidities. Many newer therapies that are being tested will exclude patients with certain medical conditions just to ensure safety of patients, and racial and ethnic groups that are more prone to have those medical conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure will not be able to participate. There was a large study from SWOG that was published about 3 years ago that showed that when you correct for all of those things, meaning that a trial that fits the individual's particular cancer stage and situation is available at the institution, and the individuals meet the eligibility criteria of the trial, the participation across the racial and ethnic subgroups was similar. So if you can correct for all of those things, the participation balances out, but some of those things, as we talked about, are not really correctable, the comorbidities and where patients seek care. So if the focus is just to get a timely diagnosis and get the minimal available care for cancer, those places are not going to have the infrastructure to be able to host clinical trials, because that is lower down in the priority, rightfully so.
So we would like to have people feel more empowered instead of feeling doomed. Lisa, what would you say to a woman of color who hears these kind of statistics we've talked about today?
I'd say you were worthy. I'd say you were deserving. And I'd say there is always a way. Don't be afraid to do the research. Don't be afraid to reach out. And when you reach out for the highest standard of care available to you. And you search through every nook and cranny and use every resource that you have to position yourself to receive the care that you need, because your life is worth it.
I know there are differences even between Missouri and Kansas, and I've had to, I've said in my clinic many times, not able to get a patient from one state the right access to the care, and I'm like, you just got to move across the state. But people don't have resources to do that. It's easy for those words to tumble out of my mouth, but it's hard for folks to actually do, Dr. Stites.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for that question, we talk about this a lot at home. But when we started medical school, everybody that was diagnosed with HIV died, just completely died. And now it's a chronic illness. And cystic fibrosis.
Becoming a chronic illness.
When we started, it's now a chronic illness. So thank you for being the one to do the work. And because of that, we will be able to say to to our ladies now that it doesn't have to be this way right now, that there is hope for the future. And we've seen it happen, and we know it can happen, and it's because of ladies like Lisa who agreed to do these trials and to continue this research, and Dr. Sharma who continues to do this research, that there will be a better way to look at this.
We still have to work on access in this country because that part of the healthcare system is broken.
Absolutely.
Dr. Sherman, we know you have clinic this morning. We need to let you go. Final thoughts regarding racial disparity in breast cancer and your story and your life spent in researching breast cancer.
So we're always grateful for patients like Lisa who put the others first when they make a decision to participate in research. We would not have made the progress that we have without the support and embracement of patients to participate in research study and have the faith to do so. So I would like to end with that thank you to Lisa and all other patients, their family members, their social support groups, to encourage patients to participate in clinical trials.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for all the terrific work you do. We're here to answer your questions. Send them in using the info on your screen. That includes the chat on YouTube or Facebook or emailing the Medical News Network. We're going to check in now with Doc Hawk. Doc Hawk, it's time to order a new batch of COVID tests. Sounds like it's pretty easy to do online. I think you did it.
Yeah, I would. I would first like to say, though, thank you for your story. And we know that access is such a big issue. We have a path forward to improve access for everybody. So I would just encourage everybody soon to be able to take that path forward and let your voice be heard to do that. And I would say also, Steve, when you're at home and you're called doctor, or Dr. Stites uses your first and middle name, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, listen, that's a Dr. Stephen Williams is when I'm really doing, but that's just Dr. Stites, and there's a certain tone and inflection that says, oh man, principal's office.
Exactly. So I would say, yes, the COVID tests are available. You can order COVID tests online from the government. I ordered them last week when they first became available. I did receive them already. There are 2 boxes here. Each box has 2 tests in them. The other thing that is also available is we know people have COVID tests probably in their house from before. Are they expired? Are they not? The government has prolonged their expiration. So you can either go online to look for those expiration dates based on what tests you have, but also when the new tests came in, we did get this card with a QR code that you can scan and also look up the tests that you have at home to see if those tests are expired. So very helpful for the upcoming respiratory virus season. Again, right now, COVID is not circulating as high as it was. We know that there is probably new variants on the way, but we know that it probably will come back. There probably will be more cycles throughout the year, not just a single cycle, say like influenza and RSV, but maybe 2 to 3 different cycles throughout the year as well.
So, Hawkeye, if you're home, you're test positive, what are we telling people to do now?
Yeah. So again, the CDC did update their respiratory virus guidance in the spring. And now what it is, and this is for really any respiratory virus because we don't want people going to work or school if they're sick. Obviously, we know there are barriers to that sometimes. But in general, the guidance is that if you are ill, you need to stay home and away from others until your symptoms are improving or resolved, and you are fever-free for 24 hours. And there's that nice infographic there from the CDC, and down in that lower right corner, you can see that new guidance for that. After that, you still need to take precautions for about another 5 days, things such as wearing masks, distancing from others as well. And of course, we would always say prevention is the best, as we have heard about. So getting up to date, staying up to date with vaccines, but also doing frequent and adequate hand hygiene will help reduce the chance of you getting infected and help keep you disease-free as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Excellent advice. We're gonna check now with the community, who are kind of the type of questions being asked. And I believe, Alexis, you grew a beard. What are you doing? Stuart Downing-Vest is in the control room. What's up, man?
Yeah, I'm watching these questions, and I've got one from Gene Rardon, longtime viewer, love his questions. He wanted some clarity on our Medicaid expansion discussion. He said, where did you say that you can get Medicaid while making $20,000 per year?
Well, that's in a state that's had Medicaid expansion. In Kansas, it's not, and so you can make, if you make over over 5,000, I think it's actually 4,800 as a single individual, you can't get Kansas Medicaid.
Got it. Amy had a question just about Lisa and her life now. She wants to know, is Lisa on maintenance medication and what her kind of cancer care looks like as now that she's a survivor?
I am not on medication. I do consider whole foods medicine.
I'm with you right there every Saturday morning. And someone makes fun of me for that, but it's awesome.
Yes.
Shop around the store still.
Yes. And when I say whole foods, I'm talking broccoli sprouts,
Yeah.
yams,
Yeah.
you know, broccoli, cabbage, cruciferous vegetables, sunlight, and water. So, yeah, that's my medication now.
That's pretty
I love
good.
the sunlight is in there.
Yes.
Yep.
Food is medicine. We've heard it on this program before. I had a personal question, and I don't think there's like one right answer to it, but your opinions here. I'm curious if you think people of color get better care when their healthcare provider is also a person of color.
You want to start?
No.
Oh, I know what the statistics say. I'm going to stay.
Right, we know what the
Absolutely, that's the
statistics say.
case. That's absolutely the case. There's really no question. They feel seen. People feel seen and heard, and there's enough institutional and other forms of discrimination and racism, and that there's lots of evidence out there that clearly demonstrates that people of color feel better because they feel seen and heard, and they don't feel judged nearly as much as when they have someone who's white. And have you experienced that? Have you thought about that?
I've been fortunate. I've had a highly engaged white male doctor that I trusted. I've had black female doctors who were incredible. I've had an Asian doctor, Dr. Savio, who was absolutely amazing. I think the key is see, heard, and cared for,
Yes.
valued.
Yes.
When that happens, and don't get me wrong, because representation absolutely matters.
It does matter.
But I think what's important is, because I'd rather see a white male doctor that is concerned about me as a person than a doctor of a minority race who's kind of more concerned about their personal career.
Bingo.
It's all about trust. It's relationship building. It's about trust between the doctor and the patient. Absolutely.
100%. And and there's lots of ways to establish that trust. This has been a great. Oh, Stuart, you had another question. I'm sorry. Did you?
No. It's one more from Jeremy, and it might be tough to answer because I know Dr. Sharma had to run. He asked, why is triple-negative breast cancer more prevalent in black women? Dr. Sharma is the expert on that. I'm wondering if either of you have an answer.
It won't be me. It might be my partner here.
Genetics. It has to do with heredity, genetics. Majority of African Americans can trace their ancestry. If we can trace our ancestry to specific areas in Africa where there also is a much higher rate of triple negative breast cancers. So genetics, heredity is going to be the answer to that, yes.
Yeah. All right, this has been an outstanding discussion, and I want to get final thoughts from all of our guests. And Lisa, A, thank you for being on the program. You're awesome. And B, I'm so grateful that you're a survivor, and I hope that story doesn't end for a very long time. Final thoughts.
When we're talking about access to health care and how people are seen, the thing that comes to my mind, this is interesting, is Dr. Maya Angelou. Because depending on when you saw her in your office, you saw a little girl who was mute. Mm-hmm. You saw a teenage mother. You saw a prostitute. You saw a poet. Or you saw a national treasure. And all of that is housed in the same body.
Yes, it's always the same person.
So when you are meeting these women, no matter how they present, and black women are not a monolith, you don't know where you're seeing her in the journey. And you don't know if you are treating the next national treasure.
I think there are a lot of national treasures out there. You're one.
Thank you.
Dr. Sandra Stites.
Well, first, thank you for having us. here, and particularly recognizing the need for access. As a federally qualified health center, this is what we do, and we are very grateful that you are highlighting the fact that access is an issue, and thanks for having us at the table.
I want to say thanks to this outstanding group of people here today. This is awesome. The Royals are back in the playoffs again. Wait a minute. Whoa, let's get back to the full uniform here. All right, now I'm ready to bat. Put me in, coach. But we got some of our smallest patients to show their support. Before we go to that video, I just want to point out once again the intersection of faith, hope, and science. When you pull those together, when you weave them together, and the best of us, we weave them in the best moments, we're weaving those together, whatever our faith may be. The power of hope and the power of science woven together are by far the strongest. But when we do it, we have to weave everyone in it, and not just some of the people some of the time. Hey, let's show this video now about, yeah, let's go, Royals.
On the next All Things Heart, we explain the link between breast cancer treatment and heart problems, and the doctors who specialize in minimizing those risks.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.